Allow me to say a very good evening to you again. As promised at the start of the Explainer, we said we'd be having a conversation on the inclusion of persons with disabilities. Now, this is ahead of the International Day of Persons with Disabilities next week on Tuesday. And where the national situation is concerned, the National Council for Persons with Disabilities marks 20 years since they began their operations. And with me having this conversation, we not only have an audience who will be asking questions and raising concerns and also making contributions towards the conversation. There's yourself. The hashtag is the Explainer. And on stage with me, I have the CEO of the National Council for Persons with Disabilities, and that is Harun Hassan. Good to have you with us this evening and for making this conversation possible. Congratulations on 20 years.
Thank you so much.
And I can see behind you that the National Disability Inclusion Conference takes place tomorrow and Wednesday and Thursday. So yep. Wednesday and Thursday. We also have sitting next to him the Nairobi woman representative Esther Passaris, who is no stranger, I'm sure, to those who are watching and following this conversation online. We also have sitting next to her another familiar face, that is Bishop Jackson Kusgei, and he is a member of Parliament nominated to represent the interests of groups, special interest groups, including persons with disabilities. And sitting next to him is Dr. Mike Kiswili, and he represents the National Fund for Disabled of Kenya. So, but you've been around since the 80s.
Yes, thank you, Olive. Good evening, viewers. It's a pleasure to be in your show.
Good to have you here as well. So you'll tell us a little bit about the fund and the work you've been doing. But let's start with the gentleman to my left, CEO Hassan. 20 years, what are the milestones? You know, what is there to celebrate as you mark 20 years since 2004 when you began operations?
Thank you so much, Olive. The journey of disability is quite progressive in Kenya. And it started way back before the independence. And quite very interesting, it started with a love story.
A love story?
Exactly. A young Mukamba boy from Makueni fell in love with a missionary white lady when the issue of race was really high. And that union brought to the fore the issue of stigma and labeling, especially among persons with disabilities who are visually impaired or those who are blind. And then the blind community at that time organized themselves and used that as an opportunity, because the media read the Taifa Leo then, Mpofu Mukamba Aoa Mzungu. That was the headline.
I remember I've seen that headline.
Exactly. So now that issue sparked some interest among blind community particularly. And they made their first march to the then Kenya's first Prime Minister, the first president again, Mzee Jomo Kenyatta. And the issue of rehabilitation, access to education, many commissions like Ngala Mwendo Commission came up. And then President Moi's administration came. During the powerful provisional administration time, he raised a national fundraiser and established National Fund for Disabled of Kenya, NFDK.
And this was in 1980?
1980, which is still there, where the proceedings from there are used to support programs of persons with disabilities. And then from President Moi came President Kibaki. The disabled persons in Kenya celebrate him as a Lincoln of their time. Remember, the president was on a wheelchair when he was given the instrument of power. That time I was not someone with disability, and I couldn't understand what that wheelchair meant. But to millions of Kenyans with disability, that became an opportunity. And probably they have whispered to the ears of the president, give us a present the following year as a New Year gift to sign the Persons with Disabilities Act. And the act was signed in 2003, and in 2004, National Council for Persons with Disability was born. And it is during President Kibaki's time, also the Convention on the Right of Persons with Disability was ratified and domesticated, including many other protocols and conventions and treaties around human rights for persons with disability. And then President Uhuru's administration came. One thing we allowed for him was the implementation of the Constitution, but the concept of AGBO, which is also being benchmarked with other parts of the world, access to government procurement opportunity for persons with disabilities, youth, and women. And then, you know, our current administration of President Ruto, where key focus is socio-economic empowerment of persons with disabilities and aspect of universal health coverage for persons with disabilities. So it has been very progressive, including under the current administration through our CS, Amendment of Disability Act to conform with the current constitution. And recently we just gave him, the National Disability Policy, because we don't like it to be, an agenda for the cabinet, so that, the transformation, on disability goes on. So it has been that very interesting journey. And, in the continent, many nations come and benchmark with us, actually, on how far we've gone. That day we received Commission on Disability from Nigeria. How are Kenyans with disabilities who are earning are not paying tax? How are they, many other affirmative actions here and there. So we've been progressive. But of course, we have much more to do, as we continue, to progress as a nation. And to accept the disability as a human diversity that need also special attention, just like other marginalized populations that are mentioned in the Constitution.
Okay.
Yes.
So I'm curious, Dr. Kiswili, you've been around since the 80s, as has been described by CEO Hassan. There was a fundraiser, and I believe the fund was registered in 1981.
Right.
So, what is the work you're doing, and how does it differ from what the council began doing in 2004?
Thank you. The National Fund for the Disabled of Kenya is one of the very earliest organizations that has been looking after the interests of the people living with disabilities. Some will remember that 1981 was the International Year for Persons with Disability. And 1983 to 1992 was the decade, the International Decade for Persons with Disability. So Kenya, as part of the international community in 1980, they mobilized the country, first to create awareness, second, inclusion of people living with disabilities, so that some of the traditional norms could really be addressed, and sensitize people to make sure that these people with disabilities, they are just human beings like us. Apart from either maybe physical, mental, or visual, they have also got other talents that they can make use of. So in 1980 is when the first Harambee was done, nationwide, which contributed about 20 million shillings.
Yes.
And trustees were appointed by then the head of state, the late President Moi. And he was the patron by then. And they sat down through the guidance of the head of state to see, do we distribute these 20 million shillings, or what do we do with it? Or we create some sort of endowment fund. And the choice was to buy the first property. That is 1981. That is Rehema House in town, just behind Stanley. And then these trustees now, they crafted three main themes. Number one was to lobby and also create awareness for the needs of the people living with disabilities and make sure that everyone could appreciate their role. Then number two was to empower them economically. And then number three was to make sure that those institutions which are for the disabled, whether we are talking about the primary schools, vocational training centers, or we are talking about the secondary schools, they are also funded accordingly. So that from one generation to another one, they are not going to depend on the handouts. So the fund was created. And then 1989, a second Harambee was done. And this was to buy the second property, which is new Rehema House in Westlands. By the way, I should also mention to the viewers that the patron for the National Fund for the Disabled of Kenya all the time has been the head of state. And that body is domiciled in the presidency, in the cabinet office. And every year these trustees, because they are incorporated under the Trustees Perpetual Succession Act, for those 20 years until 2003, they are the ones who were on the scene. And a part of the lobbying was to make sure that we have a legal framework, we have a legislative framework, so that their rights, along with the Convention of Rights, the International Convention of Rights for Persons with Disability, also those rights are incorporated in that. And so through that, in 2003, alongside with the other organizations which were dealing, particularly the Union for the Blind, APNDK, and others like that, we were able to lobby parliament to bring that legislation. A product of that parliament is what we are celebrating now. Today.
All right. So let me bring you in at this point, Bishop. We are under a new, quote-unquote new, relatively, looking at our history, constitutional dispensation, more or less. The 2010 Constitution introduced various reforms, and as part of that, the National Gender and Equality Commission, which you are a part of, looking at where things stand now, and we're talking about inclusion, what strides have we made forward in that respect?
From where we are as members of parliament, and especially we have a caucus in parliament, both in National Assembly and the Senate, we are known as KEDIPA, the Kenya Parliamentary Persons Living with Disability. First of all, we are celebrating the act itself that was enacted in the year 2003. That was one of the milestones in the progress of empowering persons with disability in this country. Like the CEO has said, we still have a long way. And one of the gaps that we have is that this act was done before the Constitution of 2010 was promulgated, and therefore it never included the second tier of government, and that is the counties. That is why some of the viewers, as they watch now, many
I do apologize for the slight technical difficulties we experienced there. Nonetheless, the conversation on inclusion of persons with disabilities continues. We've just had from Bishop Kusgei, who's talked about legislation on the table. But before we go too far, because you mentioned the theme of this year's International Day of Persons with Disabilities is amplifying the leadership of persons with disabilities for an inclusive and sustainable future. So even as we look forward to that day, we're also marking 16 days of activism against SGBV. And so we have women who are a special interest group, and then we have women who are persons living with disabilities. Mheshimiwa Passaris, does that hold special significance?
First of all, thank you for having this conversation. It's very timely, it's important, and we want to congratulate the NCPWD for the 20 years. It's a landmark. They've done a lot of good work, and I believe that we still have a long way to go. When you come to sexual gender-based violence, persons with disability are very vulnerable, especially women and young girls. And you find that in most cases, it's a single mother who's raising that child. So if she leaves the child unattended, the chances are somebody will break in and rape this child, because they've got this sick version in their heads that it's good, you know? It's not good. It's abuse of the highest order. You're taking advantage of somebody who doesn't have those experiences, and then you are invading a person who probably can't express what happened to them, especially if they cannot talk. And then you find a lot of mothers will find their daughters just pregnant. And it's really, really sad, you know. Then they have to not only get pregnant when they are not able to care for themselves, but also deliver a child, which becomes an experience that they don't understand and they can't comprehend at that time. There are different levels of disability. But I think if one makes an informed choice to be pregnant and to have a child, that's okay. But in most cases, it's said that they're having these children when they can't look after themselves, right? And the mother is already burdened because of defilement and rape, which is the community and the society. You know, when the president was talking about what's going on in our country right now in terms of sexual gender-based violence, attacks on women, femicide, 97 women have died in the last 3 months. He was saying it's not just the government, it's all of us. But I feel that the government can play a bigger role. because there's something that I saw in South Africa where you have halfway homes, where mothers can actually take their children and they know that they'll be cared for properly. Right now, you have a lot of mothers who reach a point where they can't handle it, actually end up taking the child to Madare and then not wanting to go back and pick up the child because they feel this is where my child will be taken care of better. But we need halfway homes. So it's something that the government has to provide. And the halfway homes allows the mother to participate, but also get the help from the government in terms of how to care for the child. So there's a lot of work that needs to be done, and there's so many forms of disability right now. You've got autism. You know, mothers with autistic children who are highly autistic suffer because the children don't go through academics and are not able to communicate. And then the mothers are worried about what happens when I die. My husband left. My children can't cope with this. They already have their own issues. Where do I take my son? So some mothers even think it's better to kill my child before I go so that I know my child is safe. So it's a lot of struggles. And I feel that, right now in Nairobi, in Gulf and Nairobi County are building a shelter, a safe space. And I feel that we need halfway homes. And I hope that when we have the rooms, because it's going to be 200 beds, we'll be able to actually give the mothers the much needed break and also understand that 2,000 shillings is not enough. Some of these mothers cannot go to work. In fact, I engaged the president once and said, can we raise it in terms of housing? You know, we're building houses. Can we make sure that ground and first floor have a ramp so that we can accommodate persons with disability? Okay. Then we also have to look at trade, markets. You know, in every area, schools. I'm building, putting together a school in Makadara constituency, and a classroom block, and we have to make sure that we have the ramp. You know, so inclusion is so important, and I'm proud that once we know the problem, we can solve it. Okay. Because it's halfway there, but it requires resources. And I'll come to you on that point, resources. CEO Hassan, it's like Mheshimiwa Pasaris has put it, Bishop Koskei, Dr. Kiswili, it is a broad mandate. You know, persons with disability, you have the blind, you have albinos, you have children living with autism. The conditions are different and therefore the needs are different. And when you came, or the National Council for Persons with Disabilities was operationalized, we didn't even have counties. Yet that is quite a lot to chew. How are you doing so far?
Yeah, let me first start by telling our viewers, Olive, disability lifestyle is a very expensive lifestyle. All forms of disabilities requires unique attention and unique supports. My kind of challenges is associated with mobility, wheelchairs, maybe crutches, calipers, quite very expensive. Those with albinism, because of the nature of their disability, are vulnerable to conditions like cancer and many other things. Those who are blind. Disability is generally an expensive lifestyle. And one of the key thing that all forms of disabilities also contend with, as I address the concerns you have raised, is barriers that they contend with in participating freely within the societies. Barriers emanating from best environment, barriers emanating from access to information and communication for blind and the deaf particularly. But all forms of disability contends with one unique barrier that is common to all of them, attitudinal barrier. How the society they live in view them is what is of a great concern to them. And because of that, National Council, when it was established, it was given a very broad mandate to support in a number of initiatives in its program. Education, even matters health, advocacy, these assistive devices. But the most important thing is issue of registration. We register persons with disabilities across the country. That legitimizes one to access opportunities, services, or affirmative agenda that is accorded to that person. I might be on a wheelchair, and if I'm not registered as a person with disability, probably I might get locked out of that. And His Excellency the President the first year of his administration, did say that we should digitize key of our services. So one of the key things we've done to make registration much more easier, and it came before devolution registration. It used to be very cumbersome and difficult.
People would have to travel to Nairobi?
Yes, to wait for Director of Medical Service to sign at Afi House. And that signature becomes now a directive to the council to register that person. So you can imagine people coming all over the country to follow up. It was really, that's why many people were not registered. So what we've done is we worked closely with the Ministry of Health, Council of Governors, and we decided to put those signatures now at the county level, or level 4 and level 5 hospital. But following the directives of the president also on digitizing key services, we digitized registration, even put it on e-citizen platform. So the registration right now is in the hands of the client. You don't have to look for a card. Once you register, the process through online, so that we generate a proper administrative data for persons with disability. Remember, Olive, persons with disability in this country are estimated to about 1 million, according to National Bureau of Statistics. But disabled persons and their organizations and the stakeholder within there contested this figure. And they say the right figure is the one that is scientifically accepted world over, of 15% to 16% of any population to be a person with disability. What does that mean? It translates about 6 million Kenyans to have a disability. And disability has moved from what traditionally used to cause, like, measles, is no longer there. Children, kids are immunized, and they're not blind. Polio has been kicked out. But there are other things that are contributing to the number of persons with disabilities. Lifestyle diseases, hypertension, issues like diabetes, people losing their limbs, road accident, the major contributor. My disability is through road accident. So, we say this number is big and it's growing, and the needs are quite overwhelming, and resources are challenging. And it's not the business of only a government. It's a business of all of us, private sector, non-state, actors, and government, how we can team up together. That disability is not about people's impairment. It's about barriers they contend with every day. How can we collectively then come together, put our little resource here and there together? If we cannot remove those barriers to a great extent, minimize those barriers, let the kids access education. Let the transition from one level to another becomes much more smoother. Let those who complete schools and the colleges and having diploma, let them get jobs and employment, and then that time disability is hidden, and you see the person, and the person become a meaningful person that is contributing, in the society. And when we are celebrating, the history, the journey, the contribution many people have made, parents, neighbors, some of our leaders, everybody has played a certain role on how far we've come as a nation. We never used to have political representation. Now we have senators, we have MPs, we have MCS with disabilities. We are increasingly getting recognized. All those things clearly shows that we're heading somewhere. Okay. So I think it is a collective team, including the media, how they focus on issues of disability, moving away from, previously, the camera used to see someone's disability. They see my wheelchair and then they come up. Now they're trying to redefine that by seeing you and then, coming down. So attitudinal change, narrative change around disability is something that is gaining momentum and some tractions.
So, the famous quote, disability is not inability. I want to open the floor just before I take another round of questions in the spirit of inclusion. So if anybody has a question, you can just raise your hand. All right, so we'll start with the gentleman in the red and the orange. You have the microphone. Introduce yourself and then go ahead and ask your question.
Okay, kwa majina yangu naitwa John Jenga. Jina kazi naitwa Mpeketoni. Ile swali nilikuwa naye mimi ni ile swali ya nyumba. Disability tuliandikisha nyumba kule Huduma Center, tukapanga laini, lakini hakuna disability tulipata nyumba huko. Sasa hiyo ni swali ya kwanza, nilikuwa naomba serikali tusaidie. Kwa sababu ile mvua ilinyesha juzi, ilitunyeshia na wengine Njiro walikufa. Na tukupata watu wa kutusaidia. nilikuwa naomba serikali tusaidie sana. Hii nyumba zinajengwa, tafadhali tusidanganywe kama vile tulidanganywa. Naomba tafadhali tupate nyumba, kwa sababu tunakaa mazingira ingine, ukituangalia kweli hatuwezi kaa. Nilikuwa naomba disability tusaidiwe, na tafadhali tusaidiwe tupate nyumba hizo. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. That is John Njenga. There's a lady in the back. I don't know whether you have a microphone. If you can just pass the microphone back. You can go ahead.
My name is Anne. My question is, when we are talking about inclusivity about people from informal settlement, lack privacy, mostly the deaf, you must visit that person to translate. What role do you play to make sure the deaf are represented?
So, Anne, your question is, what role does the National Council play in ensuring that deaf are represented?
Yeah, in the privacy inclusivity.
In?
Privacy inclusivity.
Privacy inclusivity.
Yes.
All right. Can go ahead, the gentleman in the grey shirt.
Okay, good evening. My name is Francisco Miller. I'm a caregiver. And my question revolves around representation and advocacy. So my question goes to the CEO. And the question is, are caregivers adequately represented in the national and local government structures that make decisions affecting people with disabilities? As in, what mechanisms are in place for caregivers to voice their concerns? And how is the government responding to these concerns?
All right. We'll take just two more questions. There's a lady who has a microphone in the back there.
Okay. My name is Melvin.
Melvin?
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, my question is, are there jobs or other job opportunities set aside for women with disabilities, mostly those living in informal areas?
Okay. And we'll take one more question, the gentleman in the reflector jacket. You can just pass, is there a mic? There we go.
My name is Joseph Karanja Kamau from Madare, and I'm very much concerned about mental disability. Mm-hmm. In Madare, there's many people who are working all round the clock because they are mentally, but nobody is caring for them. I'm asking whether it can be kama tunaweza kupata hata kama ni ambulance ya kuwasaidia. Mvua yote inanyesha, wananyeshewa wakiwa huko nje round the clock. Kama inawezekana wasaidiwe na ambulance, wasaidiwe na wasaidizi wa dawa, kwa sababu dawa wakitumia inakuwa wako sawa. Kama mmoja anaitwa Chucho huko, anababaisha wamama sana na wazee, kwa sababu akienda atibiwe Madare for about 1 month anakuwa mzuri, anakuwa released. Kwa hivyo ningeomba hata kama kungekuwa na rehabilitation center, badala ya kupelekwa polisi ama nini, kunakuwa na rehabilitation center katika police stations, wanasaidiwa hawa mentally people, inaweza kuwa mzuri. Asanteni.
Thank you so much, Joseph. Ni swali tu moja sikuelewa vizuri, hiyo ya Anne, because you had also mentioned informal settlements. Did you get the question?
No, she's talked about deaf people.
Yes.
How do we guard their privacy? But I didn't understand in what relationship.
And do you mind expounding on that question, just for purposes of clarity? Yes. Do we have a microphone we can pass to her? Is there a microphone? Okay. And do you mind expounding on your question?
Namsaidia.
Okay. Who's speaking? Sorry?
Sorry.
Oh, there you are. Hi, what's your name?
Hi.
Hi.
I'm Clarice.
Okay.
Ya, swali yenye Ana nauliza ni unapata wanawake wenye hawasikii wakienda hospitali ama wakienda mahali wanahitaji privacy, hakuna translator. Yeah.
Okay.
So ndiye alitaka kujua ni mikakati gani zimewekwa kuhakikisha hawa wanawake wanashughulikiwa ndio wa avoid issues na third party.
Okay.
Am I clear?
Yeah.
Is that
so?
Is that
I think for instance, if you're deaf and you have a person, let's say you have a gynecological issue, and they want their privacy guarded. So you would have an interpreter, somebody who will, a sign language interpreter who will know the issue, right? So I think I think hospitals should actually employ them as permanent, and they should be probably medics who have learned sign language, because at that point they will be able to understand that privacy is key, not just for the deaf persons, for every person. When you're dealing with anyone's health issues, there's some that are very private. So I think, I don't know if I should switch to Swahili.
That would be the recommendation. You can do you have something to add to that?
Yes. If you know, in the Constitution of Kenya, Kenya Sign Language, let me start from there, it's a national language. And it's already in the Bill of Rights, and it's in a very important chapter in the Constitution. And there is currently a very active bill at the floor of the House on Kenya Sign Language. And because it is also a national language, it means literally all of us Kenyans at one time, we must be able to sign, including that doctor, instead of an interpreter, signing. Because privacy for people with disability, just like anybody else, is quite very important. It restores back, your dignity. But in the event maybe the client or that person who is deaf want to be signed for, he should be comfortable with the person who is to sign for him or her. Okay. And at the National Council, as a government, all the key, services, administered by the public service by the government, we train the key, department on Kenya Sign Language, or basic sign language for that matter, through Kenya Institute of Special Education. In fact, next month, we are taking about 370 across the country, from police, front offices, from hospitals, and name it. But the most important thing is, if Kenya Sign Language Bill becomes really part of us, and the regulation that enforces it as an important language, and many of these issues will be addressed.
Okay.
But I don't know whether I will continue responding to what a gentleman on the caregiver.
Okay, the question, you want to take the question on caregivers?
Yes.
All right, let me just also invite the other panelists. There was a question, let's start with the question on housing that was asked by John Njenga, and he was saying, I believe you were saying even with the affordable housing, persons with disabilities should be given priority. And he talked about, with these rains, there are people who have suffered, persons living with disability, who have suffered real life consequences. Bishop, do you want to take that one?
Yes, I mean, we have had an engagement with government, and especially the Department of Housing, on that particular matter, that as they build and construct these houses, remember to give priority to persons with disability on the first floor and second floor, to make sure that it is accessible. Use of ramps, better doors, they should be wide enough, and inside must be expansive rooms, so that for use of wheelchair. And they have taken it. It's a matter of administrative action to do a follow-up, and that is why we want to strengthen the law, so that in government, sometimes if there is no law guiding officers, it becomes difficult to implement certain recommendations, although the needs are dire, as they may be seen. But we are in agreement as various committees dealing with that. We have emphasized to government as they carry out this particular housing program. Yes, sometimes some people exercise what is called bureaucratic discrimination, where to pay attention to such needs, Olive, requires a lot of resources. And sometimes they want to exercise their own discretion by saying this particular project can be very expensive if we embark on. And they somehow procrastinate, and they say we can do it another day. But you see, we got people living with disability today. There is something that which is a fallacy, that when we are providing as a country such facilities, we think we are providing to people called disabled. That's not true. It is a service provided to a citizen of this country in his moment of disability. Some could be recoverable, you can come back. Some may not, you have to live with that disability for many years. It is a possibility for every Kenyan, every citizen. So when we provide such services, it should be actually for the citizens of the country in their moment of disability.
Okay.
It can be due to old age, it could be due to the unfortunate accident or diseases,
right,
and others are inborn. So this particular issue raised by Jenga, I think later on we can really respond to the issue of mental issue, which is actually increasing in the country.
So that was a question that was raised by Joseph Kamau. He was talking about Mathare. So I don't know, which one of you wants to address that particular one?
Okay, I'm in the housing committee, so I want to just add on the housing committee. What we're making sure is that at least a minimum of 10% of the houses will be allocated to persons with disability. And then the ground floor and the first floor have to have ramps. And when we build many houses and we go many floors, we go up to the second floor with a ramp. And then we also want to cater for the aged people, because we notice sometimes the lifts don't work. In Park Road, we've had that problem. Old people have been given houses right at the top, and then when the lift doesn't work, they can't come down. If they are ailing and they want to go to the hospital and there's no electricity, they have to be carried all the way down, so it's become a problem. When it comes to Joseph Karanja and the mental health, this is where I said we need halfway homes. And I actually have been to Mathare, but now with the universal health care, SHIF, everybody should register. It's a star 147 hash. If you register for SHIF, one medication will be free, all right? Because it's going to cater for outpatient as well. NHIF didn't cater for outpatient and medication. Medication is very expensive, and I think there has to be a plan to bring generic medication into the country to make sure that everybody can get affordable medication. But I would want to see the case that you're talking about. Nairobi County has a hotline. It's called 1508. If you just dial 1508, it's free of charge. It's a toll-free number. They will send an ambulance to where you are and pick whoever you're saying needs to go and get attention, right? So just remember 1508. It's the Nairobi County short code number. It's the call center number. It's meant 24 hours. They will send an ambulance when you're pregnant, when you have a disaster, when there's a disease outbreak, when you have accidents, and when you have somebody that needs to be taken to hospital. Yeah.
All right. So we're talking about, so thank you for tackling that question by Joseph Kamau, but there's also the question that was raised by Melvin on job opportunities, especially for women living with disabilities. Are there special provisions that have been made? Do you want to tackle that, Dr. Mike, or do you want to tackle the caregiver question?
I can start with that.
Okay.
That's a good question, because one of the issues that we have been trying to emphasize is to make sure that there are opportunities for people living with disabilities, not necessarily women or this or the other gender. But when you come to employment now, the law is very clear. 5% should be set aside for people with disabilities, the youth, and all those others. Also, similarly, when you come to taxation, they enjoy special benefits. And that is there. But then, of course, we have to match that with the availability of skills. Of course, there will be preferential treatment, but more importantly is the vocational training institutions. Whether we are talking about tertiary ones, we are talking about the others, it's important that we also open opportunities, particularly when you talk about inclusivity, where people living with special needs are given that opportunity, and also to make sure that they get it, and then when you come to employment, and I think it's about time, the National Council for Persons with Disability, they are given more powers to make sure that at least they can audit most of these organizations. Are they complying with that, or they are not complying with that? Because certainly it's very well on paper, but when you come to the actual situation, including the county assemblies, sometimes you don't get that 5%.
All right. So you wanted to tackle the question on caregivers.
Yes. But before that, on the issue of the employment, I think we are not there, but progressively we're heading there. The biggest impediment is the word progressive implementation of 5%, because you can't measure the word progressive. You know, you decide to employ one person this year, next person the other year. You know, it looks a bit difficult. Public Service Commission, in its report to the Parliament and the President, which is their key mandate, for example, put persons with disability that is employed in public workforce at about 1.53%, 14 years, you know, into the implementation of the Constitution, meaning we are still way behind. But I think there's some encouragement that is going on. That's why you see a flat, if you see an advert, it's indicated here up at the bottom. Persons with disabilities are encouraged, you know, to apply. I think that's the most important thing. But sometimes persons with disabilities get frustrated that if they feel they want to apply for a certain job and they indicate that they have disability, they fear not to be shortlisted. Because sometimes employers, not the government, of course, maybe the private sector or maybe other non-state, that disability is expensive, you know, to employ someone. I think persons with disabilities need to declare that they are persons so that they can uptake. As a National Council, we are having a career portal where persons with disability register there, job seekers with disabilities, and through performance contracting, which, you know, make MDS, ministries, departments, and agencies to report to the council the extent of their disability inclusion. We mandated them to advertise through there. More than 400 entities are advertising through that portal, and more than 6,000 job seekers with disabilities are also registered in that portal, so that we can raise toward how we can achieve that 5% constitutional threshold. And as I respond to the caregiver, there's something very interesting that was raised on universal health coverage and SHA or SHIF. For you to access that, you have to be registered with the government. So I urge persons with disability across the country, now that we have digitized and eased in that process, to register as a person with disability, so that the system of, you know, universal health coverage, the SHA, can pick it up. Because if you're not registered...
Does it cover assistive devices?
It does cover assistive devices, and it covers, you know, many things that comes with, you know, or cost that comes with the disability. And the issue of now caregivers. Oliver, I can tell you that caregivers, quote unquote, them too can be defined as people with disability. If you have a family member with disability, you know, it has a toll on you. We have seen families that have broken because of having children with disabilities. We've seen mothers even leaving their jobs to take care of those kids. We've seen some fathers who have gone out of their way to make sure that those kids enjoy, you know, their right. So as a national council, very recently, through the support from the Exchequer, you know, we're running a program called Autism and Other Related Developmental Disorders. And we release our research on monograph or a report that brings out clearly those natures of disabilities and the unique challenges they go through. These are groups of disability who are constantly on therapy, on drugs, very expensive. Sometimes mothers carrying those kids for a therapy. The taxi is more expensive than even the therapy service itself. So you can imagine, you know, the complication that comes with it. So through that program and the fact that we've gathered, we are working closely with all county health facilities, and we have mapped nearly 20,000 across the country to all those health facilities, how they can enjoy free therapy, essential drugs for free, you know, and you know, basically those two more important, including diapers and, you know, and things like that. And we have designed that program, bringing on board many stakeholders, and through the infrastructure of KEMSA, we're going to be, you know, supplying the essential drugs across. That might not be our mandate because we are not Ministry of Health, but because the program, one of the things why it is funded is to support that. We want to also engage, share, because before the coming of the NHIF, we had a close conversation with them, how we can have an enhanced package for those persons with disabilities. But the issue of caretakers are very firmly entrenched, in our program, like the board of the National Council. One person must be a parent or a caregiver of persons with disability, where decisions around matters disability in this country is enshrined. And that conversation is gaining some momentum, and parents are coming out, forming organizations, vibrant advocacy groups, speaking for their right, very proudly, and they're tilting even the conversation on why it is all of us business, But quite interestingly, mothers are the ones who are taking exceptional lead. Of course, some fathers have not been left behind. You find vibrant mothers, forming organization groups,
Because most times it is mothers who carry that burden, as even Mheshimiwa Pasaris has spoken about. I just want to take another round of questions. Sorry.
I just want to add to the housing. Kama munataka nyumba za ambazo zinajengwa na serikali, lazima muwe mumeingia kwa registration. Okay, so ni *832# *832#. Hiyo ni boma yangu. Lazima muingie, muregister, museme munataka social house. Ili saa ile zinakuwa allocated, tunajua kuna watu fulani ambao wameregister, ambao ni persons with disability, ambao wamebook hizo nyumba, ili muwe prioritize. Kwa sababu saa zingine tunaweza kujenga hizo manyumba and we don't have persons with disability who've registered.
Okay.
Yeah? So you register online, *832#.
Okay.
That's boma yangu. And for SHIF, it's *147#. Government puts this, it makes it very easy for you, but you have to join the programs so that you can benefit from them.
All right, let's take another round of questions. There's the gentleman, right? Oh, you have the mic? Then you can pass it across. Go ahead.
Okay. All of you. Kwa majina naitwa Ayub Mwangi. Nilikuwa nauliza Bishop, watoto wengi wa disability wamekuwa na shida ya masomo sana, kwa sababu wakipewa ile inaitwa hii wanapewa na MP basari, wanapewa 1500. Sasa mtoto akishalipiwa hiyo, hizi siku zingine mtoto anafukuzwa tu, wanakuja nyumbani wanakaa. Je, sasa mtu asaidia kivipi?
All right, thank you for that question. Mwang, you can pass the mic on this way. This is the lady here. Go right ahead.
Okay, good evening. My name is Sanjana Kinyi. My question is about monitoring and accountability. Mheshimiwa Pasaris, you've just said that we should register on about people with disability. So my question goes to, what about these guys who are on the streets? You see, there's a mother there. He has kids. She's there begging for some money. And in the morning when you just stand there are people taking advantage of them. How are they going to register? Then, how is disability inclusion monitored and evaluated? Then, are there regular audits or reviews to assess the effectiveness of disability policies and programs?
All right, thank you. Akin, you can just pass the mic on.
Good evening, everyone. Yes, I'm Jacob Musango, and my question revolves around the public transport system in our country. As persons with disability, especially we in wheelchairs, we do experience as persons with disability, especially we in wheelchairs, we do experience range of transport barriers, like lack of assistive measures on the roads. So my question goes to the National Council. How fast are you engaging the county government and the national government to address this issue. Thank you.
Okay. My name is Safia Isaac.
Sorry, Safia?
Safia. Naitwa Safia from Mukuru kwa Njenga.
Okay.
Okay, ninaongelea kuhusu therapy. I'm a caregiver. About she for SHA, hailipi therapy. Ukipeleka mtoto wako Kenyatta ni national government hospital, but unalipia hiyo therapy 1,300 per session. So na huyo mtoto unafaa kumpeleka 3 times per week. It is almost 5,000 bila gari, bila chochote. So yule mama mwenye ako Mukuru kwa Njenga, ako Madhari, ako Soweto, ako Kayole, anaumia. So ningependa Mama Pasaris kama mama, uamke ututetee. Tunaumia kusema ukweli. Tunapitia mateso. So mtutetee kwa sababu nyinyi ndio mko pale kama macho yetu. Mtutetee, watoto wanaumia.
All right. We'll take one more. I think 4 people have spoken. I don't want to forget the people in the back, but go ahead.
My question is, how does the government handle data collection and research on disability? Is there comprehensive data on the number of people living with disabilities in Kenya, and how are these data used to form policy decisions?
All right, so you'll take that one, CEO Hassan. But several questions have been addressed to you, Mheshimiwa Pasaris. Bishop, I'll come to you. I know actually, swali ya kwanza was directed at you, and that I think it was Mwangi who had raised the question of education, right? And Basari, they're given 5,000 shillings, and then after that, you're on your own. Bishop, you can take that one first.
I think we have discussed with the honorable member.
I recently came up with a motion on bursaries all being amalgamated and us making school free. Because I think it's really demeaning to have people go to apply for bursaries, getting only 5,000, and it's not going to solve the problem. Now, primary education is free. Secondary education is free, but we have some setbacks, the day school, right? We don't have enough classrooms, so you find a lot of students actually are not accepted there and end up in private schools, or also proximity. I have families that end up in private schools because of where they live and there's no public school. So we have to increase classrooms, which is an agenda that the president has in day schools. So lots of classrooms, teachers, so proximity will be there. I really want everyone out there to appeal to their members of parliament. We have to allow the bursaries to be amalgamated. There is a bill that is going to be brought in by the majority leader and the Ministry of Education. They're working on it, and the Committee of Education, to make sure that we can work with all our partners to make education free. So you don't have to apply for bursaries. You just have to take your children to school. And then we want secondary education. I think when you go into boarding, eventually we will see boarding schools we don't want boarding schools to only be for the people who can afford. Because it would be nice for a person with disability to be able to send their children to a boarding school that is good if they're a student, and they will be able to get catered for better than if they were at home. So I feel that we should also make boarding schools, we should subsidize them to a very high degree so that they can be near free. All right. So this requires taxes. So we have to pay our taxes so that we can provide all these services, because it's money, it costs. So I just want us to have faith that the government is listening. And while I'm on this,
if you could respond to the questions raised by Akinyi and Safia.
Yeah.
So Akinyi had the question on registration, and she was saying, for example, the women, men, persons with disability on the streets, women with children. I think you mentioned, how do they get registered?
I just want to know from Safia, have you ever been to Kize? Yeah, Kize is 100 shillings for therapy. So I don't understand where you're getting the 1,000 shillings for therapy.
She talked about Kenyatta?
Yeah, well, Kize is the institution that the government has put to help us deal with all the therapies. All the specialists are there. But also, right now, if you register with SHIF, right? I will look into that, because SHIF is supposed to make you get the medical attention, the therapy, the counseling, the medicines, all inclusive under universal health care. It's a new program, it's being rolled out, but I will make sure that I go and double check on the therapy that you're talking about. Right? I'll definitely look into it, because I don't have the correct answer for you. But I know in Kize it's 100 shillings, but I'm hoping that even when SHIF comes into play, that it will be a service that will be offered. Yeah? And then when it comes to the families, you know, you're talking about the families that are living in the streets, yeah? We have a street families program. Again, it's underfunded. It needs more funding, right? And I believe that government has a lot of challenges, but we've also got a lot of partners, right? It's not going to be a problem that we'll do away with today, right? Because it even pains my heart to see street families, right? But I know that eventually we will get there, right? So we have to call on society to help as well. All of us can be each other's keeper, right? So if, we've got many organizations that are working with street families, and I know that government is also doing that. So it's a question of now allocating the funds, and then when it comes to the street families, it's about housing them in shelters and then integrating them into jobs and training, and then eventually letting them be able to be self-reliant. But majority of them also dealing with drug and alcohol and substance abuse. Yeah.
I know you also wanted to respond to Safia's question. Yes. Okay.
Yeah.
And Safia, I'll ask you to respond as well.
And as we come to Safia, I think there is something gentleman talked about education. Mm-hmm. Complementing Ministry of Education, and they also asked one of our mandate, because the Act gave us that mandate. We are supporting more than 4,000 learners with disabilities. And how we are supporting is for secondary school, full scholarship, from Form 1 to Form 2. Each account is 11, actually, together with some of our partners. Next year, we want to scale up that number to 17, full scholarship. And that scholarship, we have also introduced mentorship and career guidance program into that scholarship program. And those who are in TVET and universities through Higher Education Loans Board, I think that portal is open right now. We are supporting grants, not scholarship, grants that you get in that portal, provided you have registered with the National Council for Persons with Disabilities under the new registration scheme. So our system and help speak it into each other, and you get a grant as a part of the complementation. And then as I come to Sophia's question, the gentleman on a wheelchair said about transport. Public transport and accessibility. I agree with him.
That's Jacob.
It is one of the most frustrating things. You can imagine, especially if you are a wheelchair user like this gentleman or myself, matatus might not have patience to wait for you. And you end up paying for 3 seats. Your seat, the seat for the wheelchair, and the one who is the gentleman who is helping you, the aid. So you can imagine how expensive it is. And sometimes even with all those, the matatus might not be patient. That's why sometimes people with disability, especially with mobility disability, feels out. The Cabinet Secretary, our CS Alfred Mutua, did commit himself to come up with what is called Mutua Accessibility Rule. You remember Michuki Rule? The Michuki Rule talks about, the issue of matatus, you remember? So we are coming up with a Mutua Accessibility Rule to ensure that public transport and public facilities are accessible. And that's what he committed himself on as his major contribution if it comes to, persons with, mobility impairment. I think what Sophia said is quite true to some extent. And that is what the program under Universal Health Coverage and SHIF want to address. But as I earlier said to Sophia, that the National Council, we have already mapped, and I think you can come to our office, that your kid or your child is mapped to the nearest health facility through our program on autism and related developmental disabilities for free therapy, for free essential drug. The KSM Mheshimiwa Pasaris talked about is one of the most, nice facility. And actually, it is us who is paying for the services. KISE is offering the facility, council is putting some fund there. Through the fund council at KISE, more than 2,000, families with autism and other related developmental disorders are benefiting.
All right.
And all the, county health facility, like here in Nairobi, Mbagathi, and Mama Lucy is one of the key. But we have not also stopped there. Faith-based institutions, churches and things like that. So with a little resource, as the reform in the health sector is ongoing, and as our people migrating toward that services, we felt we should also play a role in contributing toward that. But I think this is an effort that is required of all of us, because the needs are quite overwhelming.
That is indeed true. There was a question on data, but
yes.
I just want to I want to allow Safia to rejoin and then take a quick round of other questions, and you can respond.
And then on the data.
Do you have something to add?
Yes. There is one question which was raised about monitoring. I just want to give a recommendation. I have heard the concerns that have come is from especially areas where it is a bit informal settlement. The best way is that also the citizens need to get themselves organized. In such areas, you need to organize yourself in such a structured manner. That way you can voice yourself. You speak to National Council, then through your organization, you are able to reach everybody. Instead of one suffering alone and the other one tries somewhere there, you need to group yourself into an organization to be able to, like even groups like Nyumba Kumi, it's an easy thing. You don't need to be members of a foundation or what, but you can have even a CBO around yourself, and you can raise your voice, and then National Council can reach out to you, and that you can be part of the monitoring, whether the law which has given you benefit as a citizen is being implemented by the agencies concerned. Okay. I wanted to encourage my brother there that it is like the law is in Parliament right now, and I think we are going to. It looks like the mood amongst members of Parliament is what do we do in order to implement the free education for our children from primary to university. I think that is the question, and I think during that debate we may be able to answer. But for now, there are other remedies available, like you have heard from the National Council. You need to be registered as a member, and so on. And then the issue of transport really is a need. I am one of the consumers of need for transport, Olive. And we are looking forward to make sure that not only matters of transport, but also infrastructure development, creating roads and pavement where wheelchairs can be using instead of struggling with the main vehicles.
But listening to you speak, and I was reading a story where you're talking about what happened when Parliament, during the Gen Z protest, and you were unable to... Yes,
to get an exit
with the other
benefit like other parliamentarians.
You stayed
from
in the VIP lounge because of accessibility issues. And you're an MP. You are the ones responsible for legislating. So if that is the situation you found yourself in, then what situation does Jacob encounter on the streets? But before you answer that, Safia, you wanted to rejoin, and then we take a quick round, yes?
Kwanza tuongee kuhusu Mama Lucy. Mama Lucy is a no-go zone. Kwa sababu watoto ni wengi na madaktari ni wachache. Session yenye unapata ni 1 per month. Ukitegemea Mama Lucy mtoto wako ataparalyze. About Kenyatta, I was there yesterday. It is 1,300. Uende ulipe kwanza ndio mtoto wako ashughulikiwe. Bila wewe kulipa unarudi na mtoto wako nyumbani. Yes, niko nayo, but haiwezi simamia na ijaanza leo. Kitu kingine ni ICU. Hao watoto wetu wanakuanga na shida ya kupumua. Once mtoto akikufa kwa ICU, hauwezi kubaliwa kuzika hiyo mwili mpaka ulipe bill, which ni millions of money. So mnafaa kututetea.
All right. We'll take some other questions as well. I'll give you a chance to respond. Let's just get another round. There's a lady right in the back, and I feel like I'm neglecting the people in the back. If you can just pass the mic on to there's a lady at the back. Oh, you have the mic? Go ahead.
My name is Helen. My question is, if the government can teach more sign language to people in the society so that they can be communication. Because, for example, if there is an occasion in the society and there is no sign language interpreter, the person who is living with disability, who is deaf, has to sit next to a person who is not deaf so that that person can write each and everything the speaker is saying. And you know, it's not easy to get the information exactly the way it is. So if the government can teach more sign language, that's my question.
That's your recommendation?
Yeah.
Mainstreaming. All right. There's a gentleman here with the microphone. Go right ahead.
Good evening. Yangu ni swali na inaenda kwa Madam Pasaris.
Jina lako?
My name is Julius Mwema, representing the people with disabilities here in CBD.
Okay.
Hawkers. Swali yangu ni kwa Madam, na before kwanza hiyo swali ni kumshukuru kwanza kwa vile amefanya mambo mazuri sana. Ameweza kusaidia groups, tumeweza kupata vitu za inaitwa GAF. Juzi nimeweza kupata mashini ya ATM, nashukuru zaidi kwa hiyo. Swali yangu ni Madam, sijui kama unafuatilia mahali, baada kama ofisi yako inafuatilia hizo mashini mahali zinawekwa. Na before tuweke hizo machines, the moment umepeana hiyo machine, tunasaidika aje na hatuna funds za kukomboa nyumba, hatuwezi pata pesa ya kuweka ile stock. Sasa remain kwa hiyo machine tukiipata tunaenda kuiweka kwa nyumba. Ofisi yako inafanya aje kusaidia watu zaidi hapo? Haya, ningeomba tena niulize bwana Kosigei. Bwana Kosigei, kuna ile petition tulikuwa tumepeleka katika Senate kama people with disabilities hapa CBD, na hiyo bill nafikia kwa Senate saa hizi. Imefikia wapi saa hizi?
Hiyo ni bill gani?
Kuna ya people PWDs. Kuna ile.
Are you familiar with the bill he's talking about? Bishop?
Inaitwa Disability 2023
okay.
bill.
All right. Let's take 3 more questions. The lady in the trench coat can go right ahead.
Thank you so much. My name is Olympia Liza Wanjiru. I'm a caregiver.
Liza?
So, yes, Liza.
Okay.
So my question is goes back to housing. So Madam Pasaris talked about housing for these people, and I'd also love to ask the measures that the government is planning to put, especially in the rental spaces and in the maybe in the malls where these people need to work. Yes.
Okay.
Thank
in
you.
terms of accessibility?
Yes,
or
accessibility of these spaces.
All right. The gentleman in the blue, if we can just go ahead.
Okay, good evening, viewers.
Good evening.
Okay, my name is John Banda. Okay, I have a very important question. Maybe there are 2 that I wanted to get to know. You see, okay, I found myself into this situation. You are taken to the hospital, you get treated, you get out. Now you start looking for this card for disability. You have gotten it. Now, here's a case whereby you are in it, but you don't know your privileges, your rights and privileges. How do we get to know our rights and privileges? Because, for instance, okay, I'm a boda rider with my condition, and the situation had to force me to do that. It is a risky job as such. As you know, here in town, with the city council, the way they are, the way they handle people. In fact, you remember during Sonko's time, it was all hell for us. They don't want even to know. You don't know how to explain. I mean, you don't even I myself. I don't know my rights. There's no pamphlet that I can read to show me that, John, you have this right of this and this and this and this.
Mm-hmm.
You don't need to pay tax of this kind.
Okay.
So please, can we be able to have a pamphlet, something that we can read and go through and know our rights?
Okay.
That is one.
So
okay.
I'll leave that one for you, CEO Hassan. On account of time, I'm going to have to stop the questions that to allow them. Uko na mwisho moja moto. Aya, tumalizie.
Habari yenu.
Nzuri.
Mimi kwanza nashukuru National Council kwa venye wamekuwa wakisaidia maybe watu na assistive devices. But kuna hii swali moja, maybe umeenda kuapply kitu. For example, hii karipa nili-apply maybe for more than a year. Au vipi sasa unafuatilia, unaambienda ukae kwa nyumba, utapata simu. Unagoja miezi 3 unaenda. Au vipi unaenda kwenda kwa jua kali kuundo. Si unaona sasa kama hii unatoboa na moto ndio at least to survive. Unajua kuna ile special siku hizi kuna kakiatu, at least hata ukipata ka sports shoe unavaa. Sasa swali ni kuwa sasa maybe unaenda pata maybe kwenda kubai, unaenda unaambiwa kuna two alternatives, kuna hii pesa hii na kuna hii pesa hii. Yeah.
All right. So sikushika jina lako?
Nicholas Mungai.
Nicholas
Mungai.
Mungai.
Yeah.
All right, Mungai. There's a lady here. I think do you sign or you'll be able to? Okay.
Habari zenu.
Mzuri.
Naitwa Mary. Na mimi ni mchuuzi Nairobi. Shida yangu tuliitwa National Council siku moja, ni kama mwaka inaelekea kuisha. Tukaambiwa tunasaidiwa na wheelchair na crutches na calipers, wale wa calipers. Na tukaenda huko 1 week from Monday to Friday. Na hata kulikuwa kuzuri, tukaitiwa daktari wa assessment, tukafanywa na mambo nyingi. Hata tulikuwa na mhubiri alikuwa anatuhubiria na tukafurahi sana. Lakini tangu tupimwe hizo vitu, kama mimi natembeaga na mguu artificial na mimi ni mama, sasa saa ingine sina pesa ya pikipiki na mimi ni mchuuzi, nikienda kwa soko nikose hiyo 100 ya kunibeba inipeleke mahali na usia na bebana na mzigo. Friction ya hii mguu inafanyaga upate vidonda. Sasa mimi nikaona nikienda National Council niombe wheelchair na nisaidiwe na crutches, itanisaidia kubebaga hizo vitu zangu. Haya, sasa si tukaenda hiyo, watu walienda from Monday to Friday. Kulikuwa kuzuri na tulikuwa na high hope tutasaidika. Na hata nikapimwa wheelchair, tukaambiwa tutapewa crutches, vitu zote. Na mimi nikafurahi sana. Mpaka saa hii sijawahi sikia silienda aje. Mwaka imeisha hatujapata National Council yenyewe. Sasa tunashindwa silienda wapi ama ilienda aje.
Sio utajibu hiyo kusema na kutenda. Bas we'll start with you, Mheshimiwa Pasaris. There were several questions that were raised. Helen, I think it was a recommendation on sign language, and you already addressed the question of sign language, unless you have something else to add. Let's get to the questions raised by Julius. He says you've done well with GAF, but he's raised the question of workspaces. He represents hawkers in the CBD.
Yeah, first of all, you got the milk vending machine. Yeah. So you see, when a group for GAF, and your persons with disability, you have to be 10 in a group, registered with a bank account with 10 members, and you can apply for a project. So when we give you the project, we expect that the group will be able to have raised the money to get a space with electricity, and then be able to start the business. Now, I'm about to have an engagement with KCC to see if they can start you off on a CSR, give you the first stock of milk. But now when it comes to the premises, right, you have to find a premises nearby, and then we could find a way to help you, because NGAF does not do recurring expenditure. If we change the regulation, then we can give you that extra boost. But for right now, we can only give you a project. The law does not allow us to give you recurring expenditure like rent or employees or electricity. Those are not allowed in the law. So it gives us a limit. But I will visit you. I'm going to go around and visit. I think you've been added into a group. We've got all the motorbike beneficiaries, the beneficiaries for tents and the beneficiaries for ATMs. We're going to put you in groups, and then we're going to see where you're having challenges, so we can help you out either directly through my foundation or through other partners. I wanted to add to the data, so I will get in touch with you, yeah? I wanted to add on data collection. We're having a census in 2029, and I'm really pleased that today we don't hide our persons with disability, we don't hide our children, we come out with them. So in 2029, when we do the national census, it will be a good time for us to collect the proper data of how many persons of disability do we have, what kind of disability. I hope that the question will be a lot more broad, so that we can actually get the answers that we need to make the interventions that we need. Now, while I'm here, I want to talk to the Gen Zs out there, because you know, every time you call for a demonstration, you don't allow the government to work, right? Investors shy away, they run away because they feel we can't work in a country where people are on the streets all the time. The next thing that happens is taxation goes down. When taxation goes down and we have so much debt to pay, right, we don't have enough resources. When we don't have resources, everyone suffers. And for me, it's very painful that already the resources we have for persons with disability is so low, right? And then it gets even lower. So governments cannot function without money. Money comes from taxes. Taxes come from business people. Business people want to invest in a country where there is peace. So let's not take peace for granted.
Okay, before I invite you, CEO, to respond, there was a question by Liza on rental spaces and accessibility, which I think I also raised with you, Bishop. Do you want to respond? Do you want to take that?
I think the law is actually clear about that, and that is why I've encouraged for you to benefit from the legal environment and provision by law. You got to organize yourself into a group so that you can fight for your rights. Sometimes you can be helped, but the help will be to a certain extent where it requires your own initiative, because the needs about your environment can easily be understood by yourself more than anybody who comes. So I wish to encourage that all affected individuals and persons get a way of having your voice heard by the government, by agencies of government. And if you don't hear anyone listening, if you don't find anyone listening to you, then you have the National Council. You can be able to present to the CEO. I'm sure the CEO will answer the lady.
Mary and also Mungai. So please, CEO, if you can please, Mary anasema mulisema lakini bado mwaka moja imepita na hamjatenda. She still doesn't have a wheelchair. And Mungai has talked about his calipers. If you can address them, please.
Yeah, thank you so much, Olive. But before then, I want to address the gentleman on the yellow, no, blue.
The Boda, John?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, he said, how are we being informed of our right?
Yes.
So that we can go and seek our right. That's a very important question. So what we do is we support disabled persons organization or people with disability to come together and form organizations. Because if you come together and form organizations, you can have your voice. So with the little resource we have, we support them in advocacy program based on different thematic, whether it is parent, whether it is caregivers, whether it is other disabled persons organization. But our website also has a rich information. It tells you are right as a person with disability. So there's so much pamphlet and information in our website. And those of you who are following social media, follow our page. We always post educative, post here and there about person with disability. I think Mungai and the lady, I want to respond this way. Of course, with the little resources that we have, we cannot meet the demand of assistive devices across the country. We work with many stakeholders.
But Mary says, yes, you promised her it was even fitted.
Yes. So I remember that process very well. So what we usually do is we have players who support in assistive devices, and we support that players to do the assessment, what she has just said. And then after, because this wheelchair, you don't just go and buy. You have to be assessed so that you can have the right one for you. That's why you find sometimes a small child is put in a big wheelchair and they can't even wheel themselves. This calipers, like Mungai talked about, has to be assessed and has to be fit. So what we do to reach much more people, we bring many stakeholders together that we play this role, you play that role. Like in this particular one, there's a group called Hope Mobility. I think Mheshimiwa Pasari, we have worked with her also on that, and many other members of the parliament. They come and assess. The process of assessment, it is the council that costs the bill. But the assistive devices comes from them, because assistive devices are very expensive. But I was reliably informed this morning that those that were assessed, those wheelchairs are coming from America and many assistive devices, and the ship has just docked, I think yesterday or 2 days ago. So sometimes such inconvenience is something that's beyond, ourselves. So what we do with even members of the parliament, many of them across the country with a little CDF, especially women reps, that you mobilize people. We support assessment from the service provider. We also transport that assistive devices, to the client so that we can reach. But there's something very interesting that we have not responded, the issue of data the young lady here asked. we said, and the Mheshimiwa said the census is coming up and people coming, you know. But as a national council, administrative data, important data, and the details is through people who register with the government through the national council. Okay. In our database, we are now more than 600,000, and we have now simplified that process, and that's why we want people to come and register, because if you don't register, you don't get or you don't access government, including, you know, into SHA, into education program, and many other things. And if this bill passes, and hopefully it will go into pass, because the chair of the committee, Special Protection Committee, Honorable Alice Nganga, did inform us next week she will be tabling it for the second reading, hopefully. And if that bill passes, what it means is Council will transition into more of a...
Is that the bill that Julius was speaking about?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, it is the only bill that does not conform with the current constitution. Remember President Kibaki a while ago, I said, the new year of 2023, he gave us this bill. We're looking forward to President also, because the way things are going, that maybe by next year we might have our bill being amended, and we might end up having a policy to see to it that the issue of disability is properly enshrined, you know, within all our programmatic or other public services.
All right. Dr. Kiswili, I know not many questions came for you from the floor, but if you can just quickly address their concerns that your board is permanent and that there is not even one disabled person in the board. Is that accurate?
Not really, but before I answer that one, I want to work on what Hassan is saying. Because it's important that we understand the role of NFDK. That is the National Fund for the Disabled of Kenya. We assist in assisting devices. The same process, and every year we assist about 3,000 individuals. There's a system of applying for them, and I think it's important, Olive, that we make this clear. Mukienda huko mashinani, kuna those forms. There is a website ambao unaweza kudownload hiyo form. Hiyo form inataka ithibitishwe na either assistant chief or the chief or somebody who knows you. And in addition, tunataka ile card ya registration unjaze. Hapo unaweza kuapply either those assistive devices or, more importantly, income generating tools. There was a talk about Olive, caregivers. Sometimes you can get some people with very severe disabilities where they are not able to fend for themselves, but then we give them those wheelchairs through the assessments and all that, but then you still find that they are not able to generate income for themselves. These caregivers, some of them are trained, like most of them are ladies. You can apply for a saloon, for example, where you can just in the local market set up that kind of a business, assist that person with disability, assist yourself, and in fact, provide some employment. Those forms will be able to give you those details. The cycle is fairly short, Olive.
Okay.
The moment you apply, within 1 year, you get your staff. The same thing with educational institutions. It's important that also schools, special needs schools, for persons living with disabilities, some of them are in very remote areas, and you find they are not able to, the children are not able to access the schools. We construct dormitories, we construct classrooms, we partner with the other stakeholders like Safaricom, where they do the equipping, and then we make it much easier for them. Every year we do this in all the counties. We assist about 5 institutions. In every county up to now we have done that. All the 47 of them. And every year we cover about 25 institutions where we are trying to fund the infrastructure. 3,000 individuals. And of course the small grants to more than 100 schools every year.
All right.
But the system of applying is such that you can go to the website or even go to the local assistant chief, sub-count commissioner, and you get all that details. Apply to us also. We are collaborating with the National Council.
All right, if you can just respond to the questions on the board and then we can wrap up.
We had Josephine Sino, who has served in the board for many years. Currently, because we are, like I said, domiciled in the office of the president, we have requested that we get another person with disability in the board.
All right. And New Rehema House remains in your possession as a fund?
As a fund, let me also tell the viewers what we have. Because over time we have invested to make sure that this endowment fund, currently we are not getting any grant from the government, but we are spending more than 200 million shillings trying to assist people living with disabilities. In town, you've got Rehema House. In Westlands, New Rehema House. In town again, we have got Rehema College House, which we bought recently, and along Gong Road, we have got a Rehema Place. So there are 4 properties. Between them, they can give us about 150 million shillings rent. And in addition to that,
150 million per?
150 million per year.
Okay.
Per year. And in addition to that, we also got other investments with the government, the treasury bills, which also give us about 100 million shillings every year. All that put together, you give us 250 million shillings, where we fund these initiatives. And it's every year that we take our annual report to our patron, who is the head of state.
Okay.
And most of you must have seen us in the county offices, in the county commissioners, and all that. We take these assistance to them. In fact, I was hoping that there would be questions to us so that you also explain how to access that. But we are there only.
On account of time, unfortunately, we'll have to bring the conversation to a close. I hope we've done some justice to those who are in the audience. Najua mko na maswali mengi, lakini nitauliza wakae kidogo muulize directly. But in terms of the live broadcast, allow me to thank Harun Hassan, who is the CEO of the National Council for Persons with Disabilities. Their conference kicks off tomorrow here.
Yes.
Right here at the KICD?
Yes.
What should we expect in 20 seconds?
Yes, tomorrow we'll be having 2 days conference here. And the second day we'll be also having a gala night where we will be celebrating those who have distinguished themselves, including the institutions and entities and individuals. Like APDK, for example, the person who started as a former vice president, Uncle Mude Ore, 1958. And all the wheelchairs they have. So we want to bring, heroes like that who have done amazing work.
That's during the gala.
Yeah, exactly. And even this week, we have also done 1-day County Disability Dialogue Forum, 47 out of 47. And the resolution they have reached is what we're going to read through the COG here so that we make Kenya a barrier-free and inclusive nation, a nation that everybody feels proud that, yes, they do matter and they have space.
All right. Also, to thank Mheshimiwa Esther Passaris, Woman Rep Nairobi.
I just want to say to Mary, tomorrow I'll organize for you a standard wheelchair. All right, so you can use it until the CEO finds out where your measured wheelchair is.
All right, thank you for that, Mheshimiwa Passaris. Also want to thank Bishop Jackson Kosgei. Thank you so very much for your contribution tonight. And thank you, Dr. Mike Kiswili. Sorry about the time restrictions and the questions that came from the floor, but I appreciate you all for taking the time to be here tonight. That winds up this broadcast, but the conversation continues because the conference kicks off tomorrow, and come Tuesday next week, we have the International Day of Persons with Disabilities. My name is Olive Burrows. Good night.